All right, let's look at some of the early civilizations and some of the explorers, etc., etc. I'm Mr. Maycomber. We'll start off by talking about early civilizations. So the first thing to understand is that there are several theories about how humans got to North America. One of the most prominent theories out there is something called the Clovis First theory. This theory states that humans got to North America by walking from Asia to North America. Now, you're not able to do that now because there's water there. But during the last great ice age, which happened about 12,000 years ago, there was less water in the ocean. And because there's less water in the ocean, you could walk in areas that you can't walk in now. One such area was between Asia and North America. So there was actually land there that you could walk on. That piece of land was called Beringia. So the Clovis First theory states that humans were chasing big animals like woolly mammoths from Asia to North America, and they slowly spread all throughout North America, and that's how humans got here. This theory is supported by something called Clovis points. Clovis points are arrowheads that were found in Clovis, New Mexico. When they actually dated these arrowheads, they found out that they were very, very old, showing that human life was here about 12,000 years ago. Now, the Clovis First theory is one that's been out there for a very long time. However, it's now disputed, meaning that not everyone believes that it's true. And the reason why is because there's evidence out there that's older than the Clovis points. For example, they found fossilized feces, they found campsites, they found tools. All of these items are older than the Clovis First items, the Clovis points, meaning that human life was here earlier than 12,000 years ago. Still, we recognize the Clovis First theory because no other definite theory has emerged. Regardless of how they got here, what we now know is that there were civilizations that started to spread out and pop up. One of them was called the Olmec. The Olmec made these giant stone heads that were left behind. We don't know exactly what they represent. Maybe they were leaders, maybe they were gods, maybe they were even ball players. We don't actually know. We just know these huge stone heads were created very long time ago. And that's pretty amazing that they were able to do that. The Olmec were also able to make really sophisticated, really great trade routes, not like help them get items and spread their influence throughout the region. The weird thing about them is they worshipped combination animals like the were-jaguar. So they made this animal up and they worshipped it. They also had a sky dragon that they worshipped. The Mayans were another really important civilization that existed. They had a written language. They also had an accurate yearly calendar, and they predicted 365 days a year. They actually rumored to predict that the world was going to end in 2012. It didn't happen, but, interesting stuff there. Weird things about them is that they crossed the eyes of their babies because they believe that that was a good look. They also flattened the babies' faces, so kind of strange. That's the calendar that they had. They built things like that. They did it out of stone to give you an idea what it looks like. The Aztec were also very important. One of the biggest things that was important about them was their capital city, Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was amazingly large. It was clean, and when the Europeans saw it, they couldn't believe it. They also had canal roads in Tenochtitlan. So the fact that the Europeans were surprised and amazed when they saw it shows you how great it truly is. The weird thing about them is that they played a ball game that was actually created by the Olmec. They had a different rule, though, that if you lost, and sometimes even the winners, you would get sacrificed. So very brutal thing. They'd actually take the heart out of the person, hold it up to the sky, kick it down the stairs. And they did this in order to have good hunts, have good crop season, even because they believed that that was going to keep the world from ending. So very strange, very not good, very primitive. Next up is the Inca. The Inca built roads to unite their people. They also made hanging bridges. So they weaved these type of hanging bridges you can see in the bottom right. Really amazing that they were able to build these, and that some of them are still around today, that they were able to weave out of basically different plants almost, and to make it into this type of structure. They also had skull surgeries. So you can see in the top, they drilled into skulls and 90% success rate, so very amazing. The weird thing, though, and again with the head, is that they wrapped their babies' heads to deform the skull to make it strange looking. The Anasazi were someone that lived in North America, more into the Four Corners region. And they lived in cliff dwellings, what they call pueblos. And you can see there what they looked like. It was inside of a cliff, and they might have been cannibals, which would be kind of strange. They actually found some research that they possibly boiled and bit humans. It looked like human teeth marks. So that could be strange about them. The Hohokam, they lived in Arizona. They used irrigation to bring water to their crops. And they were actually a pretty normal tribe, except for the fact that many of their babies ended up dying very young. But that was kind of common during this time period. So that gives you a brief overview of some of the early civilizations that existed. Now let's see what's going on in Europe. The big thing to understand is that Europe starts something called the Age of Exploration during the 1400s. So people start to explore the world and see what's out there. Now Vasco da Gama is from Portugal, and a lot of people that you're going to see are from Portugal. Vasco da Gama actually was the first person to go around Africa and get to Asia. That was his major accomplishment. So he proved that you could go around Africa and get to Asia. And when he got there, he made a lot of money. In fact, he made 3,000% profit by trading with that area. Everyone wanted to go to India. Everyone wanted to go to China because there was lots of spices. And spices could be used to cover up the salty meat taste. Now, before da Gama did his trip, there was Bartholomew Diaz. As you can see, Diaz is also from Portugal. He was the first one to get to the bottom of Africa, and that bottom of Africa is now called the Cape of Good Hope. It was originally called the Cape of Storms, though, because it was very dangerous, and Diaz lost some of his men, and he was forced to go back. Now, Diaz actually ended up helping da Gama in his trip that happened later on. Another one to be aware of that we all kind of know is Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. He went to the Indies. He believed that he was in Asia, but he was actually in the Bahamas. He was governor for a little while, went to jail for a little while, then he died. The important thing to understand, though, is that he's the first one to quote-unquote discover. Now, when I say that, I want to be aware that there is actually natives there, so there's actually people already there. However, he's the first European to notice it, and then soon after, a lot of Europeans start to go to the New World. Ferdinand Magellan was all about going around the world, though. He actually was in charge of the first trip to circumnavigate the globe, meaning that he was the first one to go around the globe. So he was looking for a way to the Pacific Ocean. When he eventually found it, he was the one that called it the Pacific Ocean because it was very peaceful. John Cabot went to the New World. In fact, he was the first one to go to the New World after Christopher Columbus. He sailed for England, and he went to the coast of Canada, and that gave England claim to that piece of land. So he sailed for England, and he got to Canada and named some of the areas and some of the regions over there. Hernando Cortez went further south. He was a conquistador, meaning that he was all about conquering, and he ended up conquering the Aztecs in Montezuma. When he got to the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, he was absolutely amazed by it, and he actually was giving gifts and nice things, and then eventually he ended up killing them. And he did that with his horses because he could move faster, with his guns because he could kill a lot of people, and because he had diseases. Many Europeans had diseases that the natives never had before, so it spread very quickly. Vasco Núñez de Balboa was a Spanish explorer. He went over to the Panama region and he claimed the Pacific Ocean for Spain. So he took over a lot of land and claimed it for Spain. Francisco Pizarro was a conquistador and he conquered the Incas. So much like Hernando Cortez, he went over there and took over the Incas, destroyed this great civilization, largely because of horses, guns, and because of illness. Amerigo Vespucci, he did not discover America. He was the first one to realize, however, that it was separate from Asia. As a result, America is named after him. So a map maker realized that he had made this discovery, and he actually named it after him, North and South America. Sir Francis Drake is a hero. He sailed for England. He was the second one to go around the world. He also defeated the Spanish Armada, which is that awesome fleet of ships sailed by the Spanish. Very smart, very powerful. He sailed quite a bit. Columbia Exchange. So one of the effects of this entire thing is the Columbia Exchange. That term describes the items that went from the old world to the new world and the new world to the old world. When I say old world, that means Europe. When I say new world, that means America. So from America, Europeans got corn, potatoes, and tomatoes, among other things. So they had never seen these items before. Corn was huge because it was so cheap that so many people ate it. So many poor people ended up eating it, which became a really popular food source all around the world. Same thing with potatoes. Potatoes became very important, very easy to grow. In Ireland, some of the Irish workers ate 10 pounds of potatoes a day. So families ate it. You could feed a whole family with an acre and a half. So a lot of people liked potatoes. Tomatoes are important because you can make sauces and stuff like that out of it. In fact, it was interesting. Many Europeans were afraid of tomatoes when they first saw it because they thought they were poisonous. All of these items and more helped increase the population in Europe. Okay, within about 2 years, the population in Europe about doubled because of all the food that was coming in. So people were eating healthier, and the population was growing quite a bit. Going the other way from Europe was horses, pigs, oranges, smallpox. Now the first two are very good. Horses makes you more mobile. Okay, so the natives became very mobile. They became nomadic. They could move around quite a bit. When they first saw these animals, they actually thought that they were deer, without antlers. So the Incas were very confused when they first saw horses, but then they grew to love them. Pigs are very important because they reproduce quite a bit. And since they're reproducing quite a bit, you have a great food source all the time. So you got so many of these happened and came over. The explorer that one of them brought him over was De Soto. Soto brought over all of these pigs. He brought over about 13, and within 3 years there were 700. So that can show you how quickly pigs can reproduce. Oranges are important, nice source of food. Smallpox is not important, is not good. But what happened was that the natives weren't used to it, so there was absolute devastation. So about 90% of the natives died because of diseases like smallpox. Another effect that we need to understand is that there's a competition. You have Spanish, you have French, you have English that are fighting for these pieces of land. And they all kind of find a different region. So for example, the Spanish were mostly in what is now like the Mexican type region. They also spread into Texas as well as like the California region. The English were closer to the Atlantic. So this is what became the 13 colonies. So they took over that area, which is now part of the United States. The French were more like the Louisiana. So they were past the Mississippi River, some areas of Canada as well. And they all had different ways of governing, different ways of going about things. So let's start with governing. The Spanish were very strict. Okay, they basically told the colonies how to live, how to be. They put a governor in charge and said, you have to look like us, act like us, all that type of stuff. The French were also very strict. Same type of stuff. Guy in charge, act like us, look like this, all this type of stuff. England, however, was very loose. They said, do what you want. As long as we get our raw resources, we're all good. Okay, you guys can make your own rules, your own laws, all that type of good stuff. Relationship with natives. The Spanish were always mean, killing them, destroying them. They basically believed that they could be slaves or they could be dead, and that was it for natives. So they never got along. The French did get along with them. They traded with them, especially with fur. So the natives gave the French fur, and the French gave the natives items like metals and stuff like that. The English were nice at first, but then they got greedy. So they started to take items quite a bit, and the natives did not like that. So they took items, they took land, natives didn't like that. The economies. It was all basically about trade, because remember, the point of having colonies is to make money through trade. Remember the idea of mercantilism too. So the mercantilism is the belief that the mother country wants to make as much money as possible because money equals power. And they do that by controlling the trade. Okay, so when it looks at colonies, it was about the colonies. The economies were all about what to trade. So the Spanish were trading things like chocolate and vanilla. The French were focusing on the fur trade. The English had a lot of different items because they had farming and stuff like that. But two major items they had in England, the English colonies, were tobacco and timber. So they sold those items to the Old World. Population growth is another thing to look at. The Spanish and French grew very slowly. The Spanish because they were all about conquering lands and getting gold. The French because they were focusing on the fur trade. The English grew very quickly because they welcomed anyone. So anyone that wanted to come, whether they're from another country, whether they were poor, it didn't matter. You could come live in the English colonial regions.